What's up, guys? What a Sunday. What a Sunday. After last week, I feel like we were kind of missing, a high-scoring Sunday. I felt like there was a lot of action this week. What's going on, everybody? This is Faraz Siddiqui. Welcome back to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. We're going to go over everything that happened on Sunday. Okay, all the stuff you need to know for, going into Week 6, everything you need to know in terms of, what injuries happened, who we might have to pay more attention to, what splits got closer, who is a better play moving forward, who do we have to kind of just temper expectations on and pump the brakes on moving forward. We're going to talk about all that in this episode. Okay, first of all, let's start with the Jaguars and the Bills early on. Huge day for Travis Etienne. 30 touches for 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. Huge fantasy performance. He was our RB5 going into the week. Continue to start him as a solid RB1 moving forward. He had 90% of the carries, running back carries in this game. It does not get better than that. Okay. Calvin Ridley is alive as well. 7 for 122 on 8 targets. All three of the Jaguars' top receivers, Ridley, Kirk, and Engram, they each saw 8 targets in this game. Zay Jones ended up coming back in this game. He caught a touchdown, but then he had to leave the game again with a knee injury. And it was a knee injury that caused him to miss these previous games that he wasn't able to play. But Ridley is back, and while we might not be able to call him, a fantasy wide receiver 1, he is a wide receiver 2 right now with wide receiver 1 upside any given week. We have a sample size of 5 games now. He had 2 really good weeks. I will say that he did miss a couple of very, very close touchdowns in between his very, very good weeks. So we could have, easily seen several good weeks from Calvin Ridley. However, one thing that is undeniable is the fact that he did not have a high target share, sub 20%, between week 1 and week 5. Okay, so, it could be a little volatile with Calvin Ridley, but we embrace it. We just play him every single week, and, we hope for the best. Now, this was a game to forget for James Cook, okay? 5 carries for -4 yards, not great. The fact that Latavius Murray and Damian Harris continue to be involved, they also combined for 5 carries in this game, so that's not what you want. I was lower than the other guys, here, making these rankings. I had Cook as my RB20 coming into the week, and I think this is what he's going to be. Early on in the year, it looked like he was going to be a high-end RB2 potentially, but, I had him as that high-end RB2 earlier in the year. Now I think he's more of a mid to low-end RB2 because of this split. But in the receiving end, both Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis went over 100 yards. By the way, Gabe Davis, now 2 top 20 finishes coming into this week. He could have a top 12 finish this week potentially, depending on what happens tonight and on Monday night. But he's someone that's turning into someone you're starting more often than not. Okay, and he's turning into someone who's a little bit more reliable. He caught a touchdown in 4 straight weeks now. Desmond Ridder ends up having a pretty good game this week. Kyle Pitts ends up leading the Falcons in receiving, finally, 7 for 87 on 11 targets. That accounted for 30% target share. Drake London, 6 for 78 on 9 targets. What's going on? We'll take it. This is what we want to see. Now, will it continue, right? That's the question. Who knows? But this is good to see. It is somewhat encouraging. I want to see this happen again, though, okay, before I trust it, especially because Pitts only ran a route on 64% of dropbacks. Really don't understand that. Okay, that needs to be up, higher than 80% at least. Okay, and then we're going to need to see that come up if we want this production to be sustainable. Tank Dell suffered a concussion in this game, so monitor that for this week. He might not be available for you, so just have another option in case you were, for some reason depending on Tank Dell. I'm not too worried about Nico Collins' bad game. We knew that this was a tough matchup going in. I'm going to continue to start him as a wide receiver 2 next week against the Saints. We talked about Adam Thielen having a great matchup out of the slot against the Lions, and he came through big time. 11 catches on 13 targets for 107 yards and a touchdown. Continue to start him next week against the Dolphins. Negative game script incoming, right, for Carolina. So Thielen will probably have a lot of targets going his way once again. Jameson Williams made his season debut. He ran around on 50% of dropbacks, which isn't bad for a start, right? Like, we want him to be up near that 80% mark before we can start him, and I think he can get there in a week or two. I likely still won't be trusting him next week until I see that. Also, we'll see what his role looks like when Amon-Ra is back. It was quite the rotation for the Lions this week. And like we said, coming into the week, Josh Reynolds was the preferred start over him, and he came through. Solid flex play. 4 for 76 and a touchdown. Guys, if you could just take a second out of while you're listening to this and click the subscribe button or the add button or the follow button, whatever you got to do to follow this podcast on your podcast app, on the Spotify app, whatever it is, we appreciate it so much. It helps us out a ton. All right. One of the biggest surprises of the day, Zach Moss literally has no change in his role, right? He started the game. He played on 80% of snaps. He saw 23 carries, which made up 79% of the running back carries, and went on to have a stupid good fantasy day. 195 total yards, 2 touchdowns. All right. First of all, okay, JT, needs to get ramped up, right? You don't want to give him his full workload. But the fact that Moss did this against the Titans, who were allowing 3.1 yards per carry to running backs coming in, one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL. Okay, this was such a head-scratching outcome, right? The Colts just paid JT too, so there is no chance that Moss continues to be the guy, despite him showing that they should simply not completely take him away, right? At some point, right? It might not happen this week. They just made JT the highest paid running back in football. Jim Irsay is probably saying, like, after this game, he's probably like, yeah, see, this is why I didn't want to pay Jonathan Taylor, because the running back position is replaceable, right? And I'm not saying that Moss is better than JT by any stretch, but, the point is that you can find guys to plug in if you need to. Like, look at how Moss played in these first 5 games, right, with JT not playing. Like, are you telling me that the Colts missed Jonathan Taylor, right? Like, you can't really say that. Right, the Panthers paid Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard doing his thing too. Najee Harris, early round pick, he's being outperformed by Jalen Warren. Every single week, Jalen Warren has outperformed Najee Harris in PPR so far. But hey, on a long enough sample size, JT is going to be the guy you want, obviously, over Zach Moss, right? Like, they play 100 games, JT's going to have 75 good games. Moss is probably going to have, 40, right? That's kind of how I see it. But, this is going to be interesting, right? Like, there's no way JT doesn't become the guy, right, in the next few weeks. Like, what do we see next week in week 6? I have no fucking idea. But I do know that JT is not a safe start next week, right, unless we hear something that causes us to feel otherwise. I rank JT as an RB2 coming into week 5, and I'm probably going to rank him as maybe a low-end RB2. Moss probably as an RB2 as well. Both risky plays. Moss is also risky because we don't know how much his playing time is going to come down. If it does, who knows? But at some point, the rug is going to get pulled from underneath Moss. But I'll say that his performance in week 5 definitely, lengthened that leash, assuming there is one. Anthony Richardson also hurt his shoulder in this game. He walked to the locker room very gingerly, holding that shoulders, but the x-ray was negative, which is awesome news. It looks like an AC sprain as of now. So he'll get an MRI on Monday. This is the best case scenario based on what we saw in this game. So it could have been a dislocation, it could have been a labrum tear, and that would have required surgery potentially. So he could be out for a game or two. It's similar to what Derek Carr had to deal with, and we know that Carr wasn't right, especially in week 4. In the meantime, Gardner Minshew would be the guy. Michael Pittman, he would get a downgrade until Anthony Richardson is back. Josh Downs had a really good game. Keep in mind that this was a good matchup, so we'll need to see more. But Downs had a couple good games so far. He's a very promising rookie. He was one of my favorite prospects in this draft class, so he could emerge here at some point as a legit number 2 option behind Pittman. And he should be rostered if he's not in your league. Tyjae Spears has 3 top 30 running back finishes at this point out of 5 weeks. It's possible to throw him in your flex in PPR if you need that. Okay, so he is a good option. He should be rostered in all leagues. He should not be sitting on the waiver wire because if Derrick Henry were to get hurt, Spears has an RB1 upside. Devon Achane can't stop. Another 151 yards rushing on only 11 carries. Raheem Mostert had a good game too, 10 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown, and 6.5 yards a carry. That's awesome, but it's nothing compared to what Devon Achane's doing, right? He's just on a different level. He now has a 100-yard rushing game, a 150-yard rushing game, and a 200-yard rushing game over his basically his first 3 weeks in the league. Right, he's second in the NFL in rushing yards at this point. He's an RB1 play at this point. Not on volume, but on efficiency, on skill. And he gets Carolina in week 6. He's going to go apeshit. Okay, if you think that this is not sustainable, you're right. But if you want to sell because of that, like you want to sell high on this, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Okay, this dude is special. I'm holding tight Even if this efficiency is unsustainable, I don't care. That efficiency is going to go down. But the volume, I can see that going up a little bit, if he continues to do his thing. Because why wouldn't you want him to get more touches, right? I don't ever see him becoming a bell cow or anything like that, but I can see him getting, 15 to 18 touches a game. I can see that, and that would be amazing. All right, and what's new? Tyreek Hill. He also went off 8 catches for 181 yards and a touchdown. He was a little hobbled in this game here and there, so just keep monitoring that this week. Jalen Waddle also caught his first touchdown this week. That's good to see. On the other side of the ball, Darren Waller finally did what he was drafted to do. 8 catches for 86 yards on 11 targets, 34% target share. This is exactly what we wanted to see. Very encouraging sign moving forward. By the way, Daniel Jones has a neck injury. Okay, something that he suffered with a couple years ago. Not sure if he's going to miss time, but it's not an encouraging injury. For what it's worth, Tyrod Taylor, replaced him. He did target Waller a ton as well. He saw 33% of Tyrod's targets in this game. By the way, if you were playing Matt Breida, you probably quickly realized that rookie Eric Gray was the top back for the Giants in this game. So you can go ahead and drop Breida at this point. Rhomandre Stevenson and Zeke Elliott split touches down the middle, split snaps down the middle. There are multiple things at play here. Okay, Rhomandre was banged up coming into this game. Didn't get a full practice in this week, but even before this game, things were not good for Rhomandre. So what's going on, right? First of all, this offense stinks. Second, he's not getting targeted anywhere near the rate he was being targeted last year, right? Despite this offense not having any other real weapons in the pass game, usually what happens is when there isn't like this clear alpha or, there aren't a lot of weapons on a team, usually the running back gets a bump in the receiving game. And that's what we saw last year. And the fact that he saw such a high target share, you're like, okay, this can happen again. Last year, 17% target share, 25% targets per route run. This year, coming into this game, according to fantasylife.com, 10% target share, 15% targets per route run. Okay, so that reduces his floor very significantly. Forget the goal line role we were all afraid of Zeke taking. These guys had 1 total goal line attempt combined. Okay, like these are attempts inside the 5-yard line, and that went to Rhomandre. If this offense turns around, we will see more success. But until then, with Zeke taking away 31% of the rushing attempts, in this past game it was 50%, okay? But also taking away some passing snaps, some 2-minute snaps. Things aren't ideal for Rhomandre right now. So he's a low-end RB2 at best at the moment. Dallas Goedert finally showed up. Okay, this was a tough matchup for wide receivers. Devontae Smith definitely felt that with his 1 catch for 6 yards. Okay, but A.J. Brown didn't have a problem at all. 3 straight great games for him. 3 straight not-so-great games for Devontae. So I think this is going to flip-flop back and forth. But Devontae Smith is a great buy low right now. Goddard went 8 for 117 and a touchdown. So glad he's back. Glad the team made sure to get him involved. Cooper Kupp returned, and what he did and what Puka did literally is what we expected, right? Kupp did his best Kupp impression. 8 for 118 on 12 targets. Puka went 7 for 71 and a touchdown on 11 targets. Extremely tight target distribution. Exactly how we like it. We like it tight. 62% of targets went towards Kupp or Puka is what you want to see. So I'm expecting something similar all year long. Breece Hall, man, told you guys, this was the week he was unleashed. We said that he was going to be in our lineups no matter what, and I hope he was in your lineup this week. 22 carries for 177 yards and a touchdown. Probably the best game of his career in terms of rushing. He's now an RB1 moving forward, given the fact that he got 70% of the running back opportunities this week. Last week was near 50-50 in terms of the run game. It's getting a lot better. Robert Saleh kept his word on this one, and it ended up working out. Okay, so Breece Hall, RB1 play moving forward. Garrett Wilson did not come through the way I thought he could. Only 3 catches for 54 yards. Zach Wilson was fine in this game, but it wasn't as good as the week before. Okay, it is better overall. Jaleel McLaughlin, he looks really good. He has that juice that I keep talking about. You guys probably saw it in this game. And even with Javonte healthy, coming up, I can see Jaleel being fantasy relevant. He's performed pretty well on limited touches so far this year. Sean Payton has given him an opportunity early, and I think he should be rostered regardless of Javonte most likely coming back next week. He did get that full practice in on Friday, so there's a good chance that Javonte is back in week 6. I think Joe Burrow is back, guys. 317 passing yards, Jamar Chase 192 yards and 3 touchdowns on 15 catches. I think he's back too. Okay, needless to say. We need this Bengals team to be good, okay? Let's hope this is the beginning of the Bengals offense that we know. I know a lot of people bench Burrow this week, but I get it. It makes sense given what we saw. It was too risky. I think he can be back next week. I think it's still risky, but probably less risky. James Conner hurt his knee. Amiri DiMercado ended up getting the work behind him, and he looked pretty good doing it. Remember, we talked about this offensive line and then being at the top of the league in yards before contact for James Conner. Keontae Ingram was the RB2, but he's dealing with a neck injury. We'll probably get more info on that, hopefully this week, to see if it's going to be him or DeMercado moving forward. You know, who we're going to have to pick up here based on Conner's injury. But we'll find out more about that on Monday. Hopefully he'll get an MRI then, and we'll find out what the situation is. Rondale Moore will also get a boost as well because he'll get more carries out of the backfield, in addition to a pretty increased role in the receiving game as well. Justin Jefferson has a hamstring injury, unfortunately. My guess is that he'll miss a little bit of time, but hopefully not too long. Hopefully we'll get more on that this week. Hopefully it's just a week, you know, if that. Travis Kelce seems to have an ankle sprain. There were reports about it potentially being a high ankle sprain, but it doesn't seem to be the case. He probably wouldn't have been able to return. So I'm sure we'll find out more this week. Guys, we're gonna have our waivers up on our website probably by the time you hear this on you know, wherever you are listening to in the morning, or listening to the gym, or in the car, walking your dog, whatever you're doing. UpperhandFantasy.com will have our waivers, my list, Tyler's list, our consensus list, and also eventually tomorrow I'll have up an article with fab recommendations as well. So make sure to go check out the website. And I think that's going to really do it for this episode, guys. That's all I had. I really appreciate you guys listening to the podcast, supporting us over on Instagram at Upperhand Fantasy, subscribing to the podcast wherever you listen. I appreciate you guys so much. We'll be back tomorrow with our waiver wire episode, and you guys have a wonderful week. Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye.